Last week, we started our examination of deconstructionism by deconstructing the diverse and variable combination of biological and socio-cultural traits that we call gender. This week, we will conclude the examination and reconstruct gender. Chapter 2: Creativity. The root of deconstructionism is creativity. If you have walls and a roof surrounding you, they can keep the wolves and the snow out, but they can also be a prison. One definition of creativity is being sensitive to the risk that structure can hold you back. For the extremely creative, every box is a prison, no matter how useful it may be. Remember the film Office Space? Jennifer Aniston is a waitress at a restaurant that requires employees to decorate their uniforms with a minimum of 15 pieces of flair to show their creativity and individuality. For some people, that would allow you to be amazingly expressive. For others, it's still far too stifling. Meanwhile, for Aniston, it was nothing but extra work, so she picked 15 random things and slapped them on so she could get on with her real job. I identified very deeply with Aniston in that situation. When I was a child, school teachers were obsessed with creativity. They encouraged us to personalize our name tags, our book bags, our clothes. And I always hated it. I like simplicity, I dislike clutter, and as creative as I am, I still don't feel the need to express myself all the time in every possible way. For example, I was in my mid-20s the very first time it occurred to me that my appearance has an actual impact on the way people perceive me. That is when I decided it was worth the bare minimum effort to look decent. I still don't care about style and fashion, so I've settled pretty comfortably into a completely unoriginal but respectable aesthetic of short hair, trimmed beard, V-neck t-shirts, and jeans. The fact that I care so little about fashion does not detract from the joy that some people get out of it, and likewise the obsession that some people have with fashion does not require me to share in their passion. Have you ever struggled to find something to watch on TV? In the days of my grandparents, there were 5 channels. In my day, there were 800. Now we get 20 streaming services, each with 50,000 titles available 24/7. More options is objectively better. But there is a trade-off. The more options there are, the more work it takes to make a decision and the more likely that you will fail to make the best possible decision. While my grandparents never got to watch exactly what they wanted, they also never struggled to choose what to watch. And they never had to wonder if they were missing out on something better. Chapter 3: The Rough Draft. Imagine you are standing in the middle of nowhere. You can't see, hear, smell or feel anything in any direction. What do you do? It's tough to make a decision with nothing to go on. Now say you can see a city in the distance. What do you do? Suddenly, the choice is clear. You go towards the city. It's the only place there is. But wait, is the city a post-apocalyptic hellscape full of murderous scavengers or a glowing utopia of singing children and chocolate fountains? The fact is, even without the details, you can make a decision, because you have to, because you're not going to get the details until you do. That's just how the human brain works. We can't make decisions based on the complete truth, because it isn't possible for a person to know the complete truth. So when we meet a new person, we use observations about sex, race, height, weight, clothing, body language, and so on and combine it with our incredible but flawed internal sense of statistics to form a rough draft in our minds of who that person is. We make decisions based on our rough drafts. And as we get to know people better, we edit to bring the draft closer and closer to the unreachable truth of who that person really is. For example, women don't know anything about car mechanics. So if you meet a random woman, she probably isn't going to know anything about car mechanics. If your car breaks down, don't call her. But if she happens to be in the car with you, it might be worth asking. And if it turns out that her dad was a mechanic and she was doing oil changes in elementary school, remember that. Next time your car breaks down and she's not there, give her a call. We denounce prejudice and discrimination rightly, but we have to be careful not to go too far. A society with no prejudice and discrimination means that police may not discriminate between those who follow the law and those who don't, the hungry may not discriminate between food that is healthy and food that isn't, and women may not discriminate between men who are worth sleeping with and men who are not. When we denounce prejudice and discrimination in a balanced way, we encourage people not to discard their drafts, but to get more comfortable with editing. One way to think about it is that the left hemisphere of the brain specializes in order, and the right hemisphere specializes in chaos. Like the two halves of the brain, order and chaos are both natural, necessary, and healthy. To find balance between the two, think of the rough draft as your order, your stability, a firm foundation. To edit the draft is your chaos, your flexibility, a way to strengthen your foundation. The world is an ocean. The rough draft is your ship. Without a rough draft, you are at the mercy of the waves. If you refuse to edit, to trim the sails and set your heading in line with the waves, you are picking a fight with reality itself. And one way or another, you will lose. Chapter 4: Archetypes. The human mind is built on symbolism. Our earliest understandings of abstract ideas always came by associating them with something concrete. We conceive of nature as a mother because she too gives us life and nourishment. We learn to be more flexible by telling a story about a blade of grass bending in the same wind that broke a mighty oak tree. And when men wear the skins of wolves, it not only keeps them warm but imbues them with the spirit of a great hunter. Children develop from beings of pure instinct to understanding in pure symbolism until their early 20s, when the mind is fully formed. At that point, humans become just barely capable, with extreme effort, of separating some symbols from the abstract ideas they represent. Children have an incredible tool that they use to develop their identities: they play pretend. Children create characters, based on the archetypes they encounter in the world, and act out those characters in order to investigate what kind of a person they want to become. When I was young, my favorite movie character was Aragorn. So I created a self-identity as a ranger. I wore a cape and carried a wooden sword whenever I was able to. Then I grew up. At the age of 20, I went on a tour of Europe with a group of young adults. As young adults, we engaged in an unending sequence of alcohol-fueled late-night adventures. I was christened Assman because I would always hang out at the back of the group and make sure no one got separated and left behind. I don't carry a sword anymore, but I took on the spirit of Aragorn and became a protector and defender in real life. That's what growing up is. You take on a character, distill it down to what it really means to you, and eventually leave behind the symbols you don't need anymore. Little boys grow up with their mothers, and mother is a powerful archetype. Many mothers wear dresses and makeup, so taking on a mother character often involves little boys playing with dresses and makeup. Most boys grow up to learn that the reason they wanted to emulate their mother was because of her compassion and care for the people around her, and that dresses and makeup are ultimately meaningless symbols of that ethic. Some boys continue to value dresses and makeup as adults, but until their minds are fully developed, they are simply incapable of making such a distinction. To say I carried a wooden sword as a child does not do justice to my passion. I studied historical fighting styles, I memorized the choreography from movies, pausing frame by frame until I got the moves. As a teenager, I wrote my own choreography and built up a collection of about a dozen steel swords. In hindsight, swords were a symbol of the skills and strength to defend the people I care about. But the moment I started living in the real world, I was confronted with the fact that the real strong defenders don't use swords anymore, and with that, a 10-year obsession simply dissolved. I still know the difference between a shamshir and a kilij, but I have barely touched any of my swords since high school. Children need the opportunity to play with gender in order to distill it down to what it really means to them as individuals. Parents who punish their children for playing with gender make it more difficult to integrate their unique traits. Parents who believe the characters their children play are fully formed and indicative in every way of who the children will be as adults make it more difficult for the children to shed the unnecessary symbols. Children are children. The way they behave and interface with the world is different than the way adults do. That's why we don't treat children the same way we treat adults. Chapter 5: Masculinity and Femininity. Human males and females are more similar than they are different. In general, gender stereotypes are wrong nearly as often as they are right. These are the male and female bell curves for height. there is a significant overlap. Around 45% of women and 40% of men are between 5 feet 5 inches, 165 centimeters, and 5 feet 11 inches, 180 centimeters. But most women are shorter than 5 foot 7, 170 centimeters, and most men are taller. If you take a random man and a random woman, the woman will be taller than the man around 20% of the time. But if you look at the tail ends of the graphs, you will see that there are plenty of women who are under 5 foot tall, but very few men, and there are many men over 6'5", but almost no women. That is how nearly all masculine and feminine traits work, from physical aggression and interest in mechanics, to the love of beauty and the desire to care for living things. Almost every individual has many masculine and feminine traits. Around 1 in 10 men are more feminine than masculine, and around 1 in 10 women are more masculine than feminine. But the most extreme form of masculine traits are nearly always found in men, and the most extreme form of feminine traits are nearly always found in women. The tallest woman who ever lived was 7 foot 7, 231 centimeters. But there are nearly 100 men who have been taller, the tallest of whom had more than a foot on her at 8 foot 11, 272 centimeters. It's a complicated science to quantify, but when you do, you can see that our incredible but flawed internal sense of statistics is actually on to something. Masculine and feminine traits do exist, gender and sex are tied together for a reason. I happen to have an overwhelmingly feminine personality. I love people, I prioritize relationships over work, I'm deeply compassionate, extremely agreeable, and prone to being brought to tears by drug commercials. I'm what you might call an individual. Neither my male biology nor my feminine temperament define me. Gender could be conceived of as incredibly diverse and variable, but sex is still binary, and you only get the chance to be one of them. In your search for identity, you can embrace your sex and enjoy the stereotypes, you can ignore it and find your own way in life, or you can pick a fight with the nature of the universe and see who wins. I have complete respect for the fact that there are people for whom every fiber of their being is screaming out that their sex is wrong. But that does not change the fact that for the vast majority of gender non-conforming individuals, there is absolutely no reason to pick that fight. There is no way for you to gain the opposite sex. All you can do is throw away the gift you were born with. Chapter 6: Reconstructing Gender. In many ways, gender theory is the continuation of the important tradition of Western individualism. Every individual is unique and deserves dignity and the opportunity to express themselves and thrive in whatever way is best for them. In other ways, it's a recognition that individualism can go too far. The ever-expanding acronym for the community of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, two-spirit, agender, demisexual, polyamorous, sapiosexual plus individuals is a way to offer belonging and inclusion as we slowly rediscover that being unique, taken to the extreme, means that we are alone. And alone is something that we cannot stand to be. We are a paradox, a unique blend of stereotypes, an independent part of the oneness of the universe. The more we learn about ourselves and the world around us, the more we find ourselves repeating wisdom discovered thousands of years ago. If you are born male, living as your society's version of a stereotypical boy, then man is most of the time, in most ways, going to give you your best possible life. If you are born female, living as your society's version of a stereotypical girl, then woman is most of the time, in most ways, going to give you your best possible life. Some stereotypes are guaranteed to be wrong for you. But breaking a stereotype is not the same thing as an identity. For the most part, stereotypes are nothing more than tools for you to use. You don't have to explore every possibility in the world. If you're a guy and you want to exercise, try weightlifting or martial arts, chances are good that you'll like it better than yoga or ballet. But if you're a guy who likes ballet, do ballet. If you're a girl and you want to exercise, try yoga or dance, chances are good that you'll like it better than weightlifting or boxing. But if you're a girl who likes to box, then box. Only when you understand the rules, when you can see the value they add to the world, are you able to break them and make the world better. Thank you for spending some time with a man with no shoes. Please like and subscribe if you got anything out of it, leave a comment if you have any thoughts worth sharing, and join me next week for a description of a snowflake.